Welcome to Scrunchy Time. I'm Nicole Hegstead, your fertility advocate. After 6 years of infertility and 3 miscarriages, I decided that I needed to become the advocate for my own body. If you're exhausted from struggling to get pregnant and want to know more about how I can help, check out my website at www.nicolehegstead.com.
And I'm Bridget May, your children's health expert. My son was born with a heart condition that led to 3 open heart surgeries, cath labs, a tracheostomy, and a ventilator. After being fed up with mixed opinions, I became my children's own advocate. If your child's health is lacking, then check out my website at www.bridgetmay.com to find out more how I can help. Put your hair up and pay attention while we discuss today's hottest topics concerning female hormones and healthy kiddos.
We aren't silky.
We aren't crunchy. We're scrunchy.
Hello and welcome back to Scrunchy Time. So this week we have a surprise guest for everyone. We are joined by Kristen Smith, and we're going to be talking about essential oils and essential oil safety and all that really yummy, juicy information. So I've been really looking forward to this call, and I will let Kristen take it away.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Kristen Smith. I'm an herbalist and aromatherapist. And so if you're not familiar with those terms, basically what that means is I'm specially trained to help people meet their health goals, meet any health concerns using herbs and essential oils. And then, of course, good diet and lifestyle habits in there too. And so essential oils are probably much more trendy right now than herbs are. A lot of people are diving into them. Maybe they have friends that sell them. And what that's done is then turn it into kind of a fad, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? They do have really wonderful uses. But when something becomes a fad, we see like inflated claims about what they can and can't do or what is and isn't safe with them. And so it's kind of become this territory that's hard for a lot of people to navigate. So what I like to try to do is help people break down some of the misinformation that's usually circling the internet. Sometimes essential oil classes that people go to that, maybe they're not taught by an aromatherapist, they're taught by a sales rep. Help them kind of sort through the information, figure out what's true, what's false, what's safe for their family, what could potentially lead to danger, to harm, and then help them spot those myths so that they can kind of walk forward and make better decisions using essential oils, because they really do have some wonderful benefits, wonderful actions, but they have to be used safely and wisely. So that's what I do with those.
That is awesome. That is really cool. Really, really cool. So I think probably my biggest question is, what are the dangers that are being inflated that people are using them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the biggest things I talk about, and to backtrack a little bit, because I was seeing so much misinformation. So I wrote a book called Essential Oils: Separating Truth from Myth. And in that kind of breaks down some of these things. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking from pulls from what I wrote about in there. And so some of the really dangerous practices, using essential oils undiluted on the skin is a huge one. So not putting them in a carrier oil, which can be anything as basic as like your average olive oil that you have in your kitchen. It doesn't have to be something, fancy. But that essential oils are what we call lipophilic. So they love lipids, which are oils. And so they're not, if you put them in water, just like in middle school chemistry, when we put a drop of water or oil on water, it doesn't dilute, they stay separate. Essential oils are the same, and they're really concentrated, highly concentrated. They tend to be irritant, most of them, if they're used without diluting. So they have to be diluted into an oil, a fixed oil, like I said, olive oil, coconut oil, grapeseed, whatever you want to use, if you're going to apply them topically onto your skin. And so sometimes what we see are people putting what we call neat essential oils. Neat means that it's not diluted. So they'll put neat essential oils on the soles of their feet, along their spine, in their mouth, any place like that on your skin is potentially opening yourself up for really bad reactions. So I'll give you a story. my son once, this is before I was an aromatherapist, before I was an herbalist, back when I was getting my information from the interwebs and well-meaning friends, my son had this big wart on his elbow. And I write about this in my book and other places because it was such a turning point for me. It was really big, and the other things we were doing, they weren't working. And a friend said, oh, if you put oregano oil on that, it'll take it off. So because we weren't getting progress anywhere else, I went ahead and took 1 drop of oregano essential oil, and I put it on the wart. I put a Band-Aid over the wart, and I went outside to go do some work. And I came in about 5 minutes later, and he's crying. And the Band-Aid had shriveled up against his skin. Like it was like melting.
Oh, wow.
And I panicked because I had no idea that was possible.
Yeah.
So I knew enough, took it off and rubbed oil on it to dilute it and wash it off. And he was fine afterwards. It's not like he had a horrible hole in his skin, but it was scary for me as a mom. And I felt horrible because I didn't do enough research. Like I didn't fact check anything. And so when I see people who are advocating for putting meat essential oils undiluted on skin, I go back to that and I think like, it's just not worth it. It's not necessary. It's not even a good use of your money because you blow through the oil so much faster. So that's a huge safety concern. And another really big one is putting essential oils in water and drinking them. There's just nothing safe about that whatsoever. I don't care what brand it is. I don't care if you say, no, my essential oils are safe because they're food grade, or no, mine are therapeutic grade, or I don't care. It doesn't matter. Essential oils and water do not mix. And so what people end up doing is drinking straight essential oil. It's hitting their esophagus and their mouth tissue and going down through their system undiluted. It's not spread or dispersed through any kind of oil. And it's really, really hard on those sensitive tissues in the throat. They're easily irritated. And unfortunately, some people are getting, 5, 10 years down the road and realizing they have damage to these organs because they've had this habit for so long that they thought was healthy. They thought they were doing the right thing. And that's what's just really heartbreaking about it. Mm-hmm. So those are 2 huge safety issues that I see right now. I mean, there's plenty more, but those are probably 2 of the most common that I see right now.
Okay. I had also heard about diffusing them, that they can pool in your lungs. Is that true? Is that something that's true?
No, I mean, you would have to be pumping a tremendous amount of essential oil in the air to have anything like that happening. Most diffusers that people have in their homes, they're really not doing much more for you therapeutically than maybe some emotional relief, like if you enjoy the fragrance of something, but they don't pull out tremendous amounts of essential oil in the air. It's really a light application. So you're working more with just fragrance, make your room smell a little bit better. But that's about all. Your lungs are going to process that and you're going to exhale them out. Your body's going to excrete them out. So, I mean, unless you're in like an airtight room and you have like a nebulizing diffuser in there, which that's shooting up micro droplets of pure essential oil. Okay. You can have some bad reactions that way, but for the most part, diffusing's pretty safe most of the time.
Cool. That's good news, because I have enjoyed diffusing them in the past. Mm-hmm. When I read about that, I freaked out and stopped. But I do enjoy the smell, so that is good news. Yeah. Yeah,
and I hadn't heard that one about them pooling in the lungs. There's like a pendulum, because so many people for so long were like, oh, they're natural, they're safe, you don't have to worry about anything. And then we start realizing, no, there are some cautions. So then you've got a pendulum swing the other way, like, they're all going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
They won't most of the time.
Yeah, and that's exactly what me and Nicole have done. We were kind of like, okay, test the waters here. And then we started reading things and doing things. And we were like, nope, none, no, never.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's, I think I view it as a tool that can be used as long as used safely. And so it's one of those things where we haven't really, it's more like we threw the baby out with the bathwater temporarily,
Yeah.
We always plan to come back to it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that that's an okay approach. Even in my own, like working with clients and even in my own home, how I approach different illnesses or things that we're just treating at home, the typical stuff. It's always like starting with the food first and then using the herbs. And then I see essential oils often as something that is a complement to the other things. But if those things aren't in order, then the essential oils can only do so much.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that 100%. And you see so many people.
That's awesome.
I had a coworker who was drinking essential oils, and I tried to explain to her not to, and it didn't work. And there's just so much you can say to someone,
Yeah.
living a very unhealthy life as far as food and everything else goes. And then even as far as self-care and creating boundaries and things like that, it's like, honey, like if you can't tell somebody no, drinking lavender isn't going to help your stress. You need to learn to tell someone no,
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. It's a whole life viewpoint that we need to be looking at, and not just, okay, well, I had a long day, so let's go drink some essential oils,
Right. Yeah. Not a good idea.
Bridget, were you going to say something earlier? I felt like I interrupted you.
No, I was just saying, that was an awesome statement about getting your food in your home in line first and then oils next. I really love that. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's like a really popular phrase in essential oil circles that I can't stand. And it's people say there's an oil for that. And I don't like that phrase at all because it dismisses the fact that if somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, well, I have high blood pressure and my doctor says I can try lifestyle things for 6 months before medication. But they don't want to give up drinking 2 pots of coffee a day and eating burgers and fast food and, French fries and not changing their lifestyle habits and not giving themselves rest. I can't, you're not going to solve that problem with lavender
Right. Exactly.
or anything else.
Yeah.
And so oils are a great tool, but they do have their limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at that point, you're just, it's no different than medication,
Yeah.
You're just putting a Band-Aid on it,
Exactly.
if it even works at that point, just like medication.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
A better phrase might be there's a vegetable for that.
I like that.
Because there's vegetables do everything.
Right.
I always worry that I come across as a vegan or something because I'm always like, more vegetables, but I'm not. Like, it's just, when you have a problem, turn to vegetables.
It's so true. There's like how many fad diets in the world. And like the one thing I think they can all agree on is eat more vegetables.
Yes, very true. Very true. Very true. So I was going to ask, could you explain for our listeners food grade and pharmaceutical grade? Because you mentioned those terms earlier, and not everybody would be familiar with that.
Right. So in the United States, there's no like third-party grading system. So any brand can say that their oils are therapeutic grade. And that's usually the term we hear tossed around most often is, well, these are therapeutic grade or these are 100% pure. And in the United States, that doesn't really mean anything. So you have to like contact the company and like, well, what do you mean by therapeutic grade? With the food grade issue, there's a particular brand that has like FDA approval to say that their oils are food grade because they've been tested. That's not really an indicator that you can use them freely, right? Like it doesn't mean they're safe to use in water. It doesn't mean that they're safe to always take internally just because of that. But they did go through the process of having their particular one labeled as food grade, some of their oils.
Okay.
So there's that. And that's what, they do for marketing purposes. For most brands, though, therapeutic is what we see used a lot. And the reason I emphasize in the United States that term doesn't mean anything is because in parts of Europe where aromatherapy is a little bit more advanced or their government regulatory agencies give a little bit more support to holistic medicine, they might have grading systems that a body outside of the company itself actually grades the oils. Like this is used for medicinal purposes. This one's only good for the perfumery industry, or this one is okay as a food additive. So it's important for those of us in the US to recognize, though, that therapeutic grade is just a marketing term. So you have to reach out to the company itself and find out, what do you mean by that? And I prefer to look for organic certification, because it's something that the company itself can't put on a label.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have a third party come in who's neutral and verify that the growing conditions were to a certain standard.
Right.
So I like to see that. There's also a test that companies can do. Consumers just need to know it as the GCMS test. What that does is a way for companies to test all the chemicals that are in an essential oil, and it will flag something if there's an adulterant in it, or there's like somebody wanted to stretch their batch of lavender essential oil, so they added in a synthetic chemical that smells just like it. That'll flag the system.
Okay.
So if there's a GCMS report, that kind of gives the brand a little bit more authority, because they're going an extra step. But that's kind of the gist of the therapeutic grade thing.
Okay. Cool.
So a question I have, I've heard about distillations in creating the oils as well. From in researching different companies, some say there's like up to 4 distillations, and others say there's no such thing. So what's the scoop on that?
Yeah, the only time really that the number of distillations comes into play, and it's not really the number of them, but the stage of distillation, is for ylang ylang. So it looks funny to us. It's spelled YLANG, YLANG. But that oil has a long distillation, and so sometimes they'll take from the first hour or the first 2 hours or the whole thing. And that's always labeled from, if it's a good brand, they're going to label which part of the distillation it is. But no reputable company, it's not worth their time to take plant material, go through the whole process of distilling it, cool down the still, and then fire it back up again to do another distillation. So it's just not something we really see. It doesn't make sense, even from a company standpoint. Would it be financially responsible for them? They'd waste a lot of money trying to run another distillation on old plant material. So I'm of the belief that it's kind of another marketing thing. Okay. People saying that this comes from the first distillation and not the second one.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
That was really cool.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I've heard it specifically used about peppermint and how it smells like the first distillation is more planty smelling, I guess. And then beyond that, if it's distilled anymore, peppermint will smell like candy, like more of the candy flavored.
Yeah, so what a lot of times what can happen is, or what does happen when something's steam distilled, the first molecules that are coming off of the plant that are evaporating off, so that's what happens. Steam is pushed up through the plant material, and as it comes up through there, it's pulling with it what we call the volatile compounds. Volatile just meaning that they evaporate off quickly. So they pull off these molecules, and the first ones to come off are the ones that have the lowest molecular weight. So you don't have to know chemistry to get this. Just know they're the smaller molecules. They don't weigh much, and so they evaporate off first. The longer the still runs, the higher percentage of heavier molecules are able to eventually work their way out of the plant material. So if you have a peppermint that was distilled for, and I don't honestly know the distillation time average for peppermint, so I'm just going to throw out numbers here. Let's say a peppermint's distilled for 1 hour, and then another batch is distilled for 2 hours. They're going to have a different chemical profile, because the 1 hour is just going to have maybe the lighter and the middleweight molecules, whereas the 2 hour would maybe have a fuller spectrum of it. Okay. So that's more with distillation time, not so much about first or second or third or fourth distillation.
Is there one that would be better for you?
No.
Okay.
No, it would depend on your goals, really. I would personally, I prefer something that's going to have a full spectrum of all the volatile compounds, because those little molecules interplay together. And so we use this term called synergy, meaning that all those individual parts, when they're put together, their total action is greater than them all separate. So you could think of it as like 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 instead of 3, because they're working together, they have this bigger result. And we see this in conventional medicine too. So this isn't like a fringe woo-woo idea. So I prefer like a fuller spectrum of all the compounds, because they're going to interplay together more, rather than having something that has a smaller profile of chemicals in it.
That makes sense. And it kind of fits with the concept of whole food too.
Right.
It's better to eat an apple than it is to juice it, kind of thing. So
Yes. So if you have like a short distillation, you end up getting something that's much more limited on the chemicals. And so it's a step further away from what you're finding in the whole plant.
yeah, makes sense. Makes total
Yeah,
sense.
that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So what would be ways that you do recommend using essential oils, and are there any specific brands that you recommend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll hit the brand question first, because it's one I probably get like more often than anything. I don't like to like name specific brands. It always puts me in an awkward position. I will, like, full disclosure, I'm an affiliate for a few brands that I recommend. So that means when I link to them on my website, if somebody buys, I can earn a small commission that helps support, the work that I do there and all the free information I give out. So what I would recommend, if you want to see a list that I update regularly with brands that I am an affiliate for, and those I'm not, but that I know that are reputable, I have it on a resources page. I don't know if you guys do show notes.
Yep.
We could put in there.
Okay.
What I look for though I like to see certified organic or wild crafted. So sometimes, like French lavender, we also often will get like wild crafted. And if something's wild crafted though, I also want to see some sort of oversight that it's ethically harvested. Because so much plant material is required to make essential oils. And as the industry is booming, sustainability has become a big issue with things like frankincense and rosewood and sandalwood and some other plants. And so if it's wild crafted, I like to see, do they make sure that they're harvesting in sustainable practices? So I look for those. I look for GCMS reports that I mentioned previously. I want to make sure that they list the common plant name, the botanical name. So it's the one that looks like Latin on a bottle. That's really important. I like to see if it has even something called chemotypes for plants like rosemary and thyme. You can have one bottle of rosemary essential oil and another one over here, and they can have almost a completely different chemical profile depending on the plant that it came from. So that's an important thing I look for. I like to see that the prices are all very different, because a bottle of lemon essential oil should cost you substantially less than a bottle of what we call neroli, which is orange blossom essential oil. It's one of the most expensive.
Okay.
If somebody is selling oils and they're all the same cost, that tells me, like, big red flags. That's not how this works. So I like to see that. And I'll also scope out the safety information that the company provides. A lot of essential oil brands in the US are doing really good things promoting good, safe essential oil information. And so I'll look for that. Do they encourage dilution? Do they caution people about ingesting them? Those are two big red flags. If I see a brand is a little more free with that, or maybe they have representatives who are, that's a red flag to me. That, for me as a company, I can't support. But when they're giving that caution, they're providing their customers with really good information, then that gives me a lot more confidence in that brand.
Cool. Very cool. Cool. And then safe practices. How would you recommend using them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, so most people, I think what they're going to benefit from most is using essential oils topically or inhaling them. Um, they can be safely ingested in very certain situations and working with the right professionals, but it's never ever something that somebody should do medicinally without oversight from someone who's had extensive training. That's so important. They can be used safely in food, in recipes. It's not that different than using like orange zest or lemon zest in a recipe. The reason it gives food flavor is because it contains the essential oils. So there are times it can be used safely that way, but most people, to stay on the safe side and make sure that they're taking good care of themselves and their family, it's going to be topically diluted in a carrier oil, or it's going to be inhalation. And a lot of people, we skip over the inhalation part because it just seems like it's not big enough, it's not doing enough for us. But we have to remember that essential oils are volatile. So in nature, they enter us best by inhaling them, right? Like when we brush by peppermint, we smell it. Those molecules are made to evaporate and we can easily take them in. And there is just fascinating research on what happens when we inhale essential oils and how they go straight from our nose into the olfactory system, and it connects directly to our brains. And so I don't think we never want to overlook how much they have to offer us that way, especially for emotional needs, mental health needs. They can be so supportive in those areas just by inhaling them. And that can be as simple as putting them in a diffuser in an appropriately sized room. And it only has to run for like 10 minutes and then you can turn it off and be done. It's not something that has to pump in the air all day. It could be as simple as putting a drop of essential oil on a cotton ball and just slowly breathing in and out for 5 to 10 minutes. Like you don't even need the diffuser. So those are really simple ways to benefit from them by inhaling them. I think something like lavender essential oil on a cotton ball or a tissue and tuck it under your pillowcase at night if you have trouble sleeping. Like that's such a simple and safe way to use lavender, but also it's just so effective. So, I'd want your listeners to know like inhaling them is really, really effective, even though it seems like you're not doing that much for yourself. It's one of the best ways to use them. And then topically on the skin, they offer a lot of support and help for skin injuries, healing burns or bug bites and pimples, things like that. They're really great for that. But again, dilution is key. If people need a really simple way to dilute them and know what dilutions are safe for what ages, because that comes into play. Different stages of life, our skin is much more sensitive than others. I do have a resource that's an essential oils quick reference guide where there are printable charts and checklists. So you can immediately see if I went a 1% dilution in 1 teaspoon of oil, how many drops do I need? Kind of breaks all of that down to I reference it myself all the time because it saves me math. But for like infants, they're especially newborns have a lot of caution for that. So it's not something I really recommend unless you have training and you kind of know what you're doing. But even as they get, 3 to 6 months and you have a reason to want to apply essential oils, well, they need a very, very mild dilution of only the very, very safest essential oils because their skin is thin, it's very sensitive, and their entire metabolizing and detoxifying system is immature. And so we don't need to overload their system with anything that they don't need. So that's really helpful. As kids get older, then you can use more essential oil topically. You don't need the super mild dilutions. Up until the age of about 12 is when we cross over into like adult dosage for topical applications. But pregnancy is another time when people generally want to back off of the amount of essential oil they use on their skin for 2 reasons. The main one is our skin tends to get way more sensitive during pregnancy. And things that you didn't react to before, suddenly you're reacting to now. So that's to kind of cut down on the chance that you have a bad reaction to something. And then also essential oils do cross the placental barrier. If you're applying them topically, it's going to be in minute amounts, but it's still something we need to consider. And so those are kind of some safety guidelines and usage guidelines for inhaling and using them topically.
Okay. Very cool. Very, very cool. This has been awesome. I've loved being able to ask you all these questions and get to know this topic a lot better. So this has been a really, really great talk. I'm going to have you say the name of your book again, and then we're going to put a link to it as well in the show notes. But what was the name of your book?
Yeah, the name of the book that's available in print, PDF, and Kindle is Essential Oils: Separating Truth from Myth. So I have a link to that on my website, as well as the quick reference guide that are both really handy. And there's not a lot of crossover between the two things.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll put links to both those and your website as well.
Awesome.
So that way people can find that. If you guys have any questions, you can always drop Bridget and I a note as well, or find Kristen's website and go from there. So
yeah, that'd be great.
And you're on Facebook and Instagram, is that right, Kristen?
Yes, I am. I hang out there. I do have an old Pinterest account. I don't recommend anyone go follow me there because I don't do anything with it. There's only so much time in the day, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Pinterest is awesome for cooking, like for cakes and decorating, but it's hard when it comes to health to make it, for health. So
exactly, you get it.
Yeah, it's a fun place. I don't go there to look up stuff.
No, please don't.
Awesome.
And what's your handle on Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah,
so people can find you.
On Instagram, it's the little @ A Better Way to Thrive. That's the name of my business online. And on Facebook, I had to use A Better Way to Thrive blog because somebody had a better way to thrive.
Gotta love that.
What do you do?
Great. Yeah.
Cool. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Bridget, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's everything for now. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to our podcast today, and we will see you all back in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
If you'd like to know more about our programs or watch the podcast in video form, you can visit our websites,
where we also share links and resources concerning the different topics that we have discussed.
Check me out at www.nicolehegstead.com.
And check me out at www.bridgetmay.com. See you next time.